Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Leslie presents. And now your host, Paul Leslie.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is our great honor to welcome Cynthia Weil and Barry Mann. It's a great pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I kind of want to start from the beginning. What was life like growing up for you folks? Was it a very musical household?
My household was kind of musical. On my mother's side, there were a lot of musicians. She had cousins that were classical musicians. Matter of fact, one of them, I think, was a lead violinist in the New York Philharmonic. And there were some friends that lived in Brighton Beach, and we would visit. And the father would play violin, the son would play piano, and then one of the daughters played cello, and they'd kind of put on a performance. So I really was brought up with music. My mother played piano too, and my brother would always be playing classical music in the background.
Did me?
Miss Weil.
Yeah, absolutely nothing except no music in my family, except that my mother's sister, who was my favorite aunt, was a dancer. And that was the only connection to music there was in my household. But she was definitely a showbiz, anti-mame kind of person.
Right. And you were like an exotic dancer, weren't you, Cynthia?
You could bleep that, Paul.
we will, well, I don't know. Okay, so what about favorite musicians growing up, like favorite artists?
Well, I started listening to pop radio even right before rock and roll even hit. So I used to listen to a radio program called Martin Block's Maple Leaf Ballroom. I think it was on ABC radio. And they would play, on Sundays, they play the top 20 records. And then they do a countdown. So some of the records, there were a lot of pop records for that period of time. I remember I was a big Frankie Lane fan, stuff like Oh Lucky Old Sun and Mule Train. And then when rock and roll hit, there were a lot of doo-wop records. And I'm trying to remember I liked a lot of Presley. I thought he was great. I can't remember really. I mean, there's probably a list of artists that I really like, but I can't remember them all right now.
I used to also listen to Make Believe Ballroom, and I loved the countdown, but I was basically interested in musical theater. And even when I kind of got into the pop music business, Barry had to educate me on pop music.
Yes, that's true. I got into the Drifters and the Everly Brothers, and I told Cynthia to listen to those records especially, plus everything else that was going on.
What about the first song you guys wrote? Not together, but just all in all.
I was around, this before I was in the music business. I was about 11 or 12, and I wrote a song called, one of those kind of had doo-wop chords, C, A minor, F, G, and it was a song called The Ecstasy of Love. And as a matter of fact, when I got in the music business, that was the first song I got published. I was very lucky. In fact, it was the first song I even showed, and that was the song. Cynthia?
Yes. What was the first song I ever wrote? I think it was probably that song that was on the back of Way of a Clown.
Sherry?
Yes, right. I couldn't remember the name of
right.
it, which I wrote with Teddy Randazzo, and that's how I met Barry.
Well, on that note, this question is for Cynthia Weil. When you first met Barry Mann, what was your first impression?
He was very hot. It's my second impression, too.
How about when you saw me play piano?
Oh, I just thought he was sexy and talented and terrific, and it's so much so that I found out where he was signed and followed him up there. So it was a case of stalking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
But when I went up to play a song for Teddy Randazzo with Howie Greenfield, and when I played, she was really into a lot of kind of show music. And when I played the song, she had never really seen somebody play pop music the way I played it. Carole King could have gone up there and she would have been bold.
I would have fallen in love with Carole King. I could have married her.
Okay. Well, this question is for Barry Mann. When you first met Cynthia Weil, what was your first impression of her?
Well, I saw her. It's when I went up to play the song for Teddy. She was there. She was writing with Randazzo. So I looked. I thought she was really gorgeous. But I thought that she was Teddy Randazzo's girlfriend. So I didn't do anything. I just kind of laid off it and I forgot about it. The next thing I knew, I think the next week she came up to Alden Music, where I was signed as a songwriter, and that was it. She kind of hooked me. If you also want to know what I thought of her talent, at that point we weren't writing together, but I asked to see her lyrics. After we were going together. About a few months later, I asked to see her lyrics. I was curious. And I really loved what she had shown me. I really thought that she had a great combination of sophistication and also soul. And I thought it would really fill a niche that was needed in the pop market.
I was hoping that you could tell us about the first time that you guys wrote together. What was that experience like?
God, Sin, do you remember? I don't even remember. I can almost say it feels like the way we write now. I mean, we just kind of hit it off. It just worked.
The first song we wrote was that Vinnie Monte song, a song called Painting the Town with Teardrops.
And you got a record on it.
And we got a record on it. And I think the second song we wrote was Bless You, the Tony Orlando cut.
That was that first chart record.
Yeah.
Amazing. I was hoping that you could also share your memories of the time at Don Kirshner's Alden Music.
Mm-hmm.
It was Alden, although it was Al and Don. A lot of people do say Alden, but it was Alden. And it was like a school for songwriters with a bunch of crazy and ambitious, energetic kids all competing with each other for records.
What about your memories of the Brill Building around that area?
Well, we weren't in the Brill Building, of course. We were in 1650 Broadway, which is like kind of the sister building. It was a few blocks up on 51st Street between Broadway and 7th Avenue. So the Brill Building or 1650 were similar, except the Brill Building had older publishers. But it was all very competitive, and everybody, at least it was competitive within Alden music. We weren't as competitive with other writers that were not part of Alden, but I'm sure they were competitive within their own organizations. It was really kind of a hotbed of pop writing. It was a very exciting time, even though at the time we were doing it, we didn't know how exciting it was until later on, and we didn't know that our songs would end up lasting the way they did. But it was a great time for music. Everything was wide open. There were a lot of record labels. There were a lot of artists who didn't write their own songs. So there was a lot of stuff, a lot of places for our material. And also, we could write all different kinds of songs. We could experiment. There was nothing to hold us back. Carole King and Jerry Goffin and Cynthia and myself always thought of ourselves as the bridge between old Tin Pan Alley and rock and roll. And that was the feeling.
This one's for Barry Mann. When you had that hit with Who Put the Bomb,
right? How
did you feel about that?
I was glad to have a hit because I put a few records out before. It was really just a spoof song. It was a put on. I mean, it was not the kind of song that makes an artist. As a matter of fact, when they told me to cut an album, which I didn't want to do because there was no point in it. I mean, what was I going to do? I mean, if I cut an album of all funny records, maybe it would have done something. But it wasn't, and it was a waste of money.
I wanted to ask, for the benefit of all of our listeners, about some of the most well-known songs that you two wrote.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows You've Lost That Lovin' Feeling.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that one.
We had met Phil Spector in New York, and he asked us to come out to California to write with him. And so we packed up our dog and hopped on a plane and went out to Los Angeles. We were staying at the Chateau Marmont because it was the only hotel that would let us have a dog and a piano. And Phil played us this record of these two guys from Orange County who really sounded black, and we loved their sound. And we went back to the hotel, and Barry suggested we write them a ballad. And I don't know where you got that idea, honey, because that we heard up-tempo stuff by then.
Well, because we both love Baby, I Need Your Lovin'.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that triggered You've Lost That Lovin'.
Yeah, that was our favorite record at the time. It had a kind of yearning that was very touching to us. And so we sat down and started writing the song, and then when we got halfway through, we couldn't figure out how to end the chorus, right?
Yep.
And what to do in the bridge. And Barry, you called Phil, and
yeah, and we
played
what we had. He was really touched, especially when we came to the line, something beautiful's dying. He said it made him feel like crying. Anyway, then he picked up on it. We went over to his house and we finished the song. And he suggested that we do that middle part, and use that kind of hang-on sloopy chord progression, bum, 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 bum.
Which never would have dawned on me to go that direction for a bridge. Would you have ever thought of that?
No, it was a very good contribution.
I don't even know if this is possible to answer, but of the songs that you have written, could you guys pick a favorite song?
Does it have to be a hit?
No, not at all.
We wrote a song. We worked for a while on a musical of the movie Mask, and it was produced at Pasadena Playhouse, and there was a song in there called Close to Heaven that I think is probably one of the best lyrics I've ever written, and I love what Barry did. It's a shame that it won't get heard, but I think that was certainly my favorite as far as my own contribution.
Yeah, and I feel the same way about the song myself. I think it's a great song, melodically too, and lyrically, it's unbelievable.
It's very Springsteen-esque. I was very inspired by him.
Yeah, and there was another song in the show that ended. It was a very kind of a long piece. What was the title?
I think we just called it Sturgis.
Sturgis,
yeah.
And that song too is I really love. And then there's a song I wrote by myself called "There's No Easy Way to Break Somebody." There's No Easy Way that James Ingram recorded. Kind of one of my favorites. Because I did it, I did the lyric and the music. But it was a very soulful lyric because it was an experience that I had 20 years before that, before I met Cynthia. I had broken up with a girlfriend, and it was very touching, and it was that story.
Gee, I thought you didn't exist before you met me.
Well, one song that I think everybody knows, and I have to say, it's such a fantastic song. I love this song, Somewhere Out There.
Oh.
What was the inspiration? I love that song.
Yeah,
thanks. Yeah.
We I like it a lot too. I think it's timeless. And when we wrote it, Barry said this could have been written in the 1940s, and it won a couple of Grammys, and it became kind of an instant standard.
Yeah.
It was and it was attached to an animated film, and at that time, which was the mid 80s, animation was kind of dead, and we thought that this film would barely be seen because it was about a Jewish mouse, and so we just loved the script, and we had the opportunity to work with Steven Spielberg because he was executive producer, and so we felt very free in writing the songs for this movie because we thought no one would be listening.
What was it like? You mentioned Mr. Mann about how much you liked Elvis. What was it like to have him record a song you wrote?
You could call me Barry.
Okay.
The first time I saw him sing one of our songs, he was in the movie. It was one of the movies he was in.
You mean the documentary?
The documentary, and he sang. It was in Las Vegas, and he recorded two of our songs, "Love and Feeling," and "I Just Can't Help Believing." And it was a bit going on in the movie. He was very nervous about forgetting the lyrics. You'd see him in the dressing room trying to remember it, and he couldn't do it. He went on stage, and he forgot some of the lyric on stage too. But he kept going. It was good. And then he did "Love and Feeling," which was great. Look, it's Elvis Presley, man, and
it's iconic.
It's iconic, exactly. It was a thrill.
Well, on that note, the Beatles, that had to have been as thrilling, if not more.
Well, which song are you talking about?
Didn't they record live a song that you guys wrote, Where Have You Been All My Life?
Yeah, but it was before they were the Beatles.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and it was recorded live in Germany. Yeah, I don't think Ringo was the drummer.
It was Pete Best.
It was called Where Have You Been All My Life?
Yeah.
And it had been recorded by an artist named Arthur Alexander. And they were doing covers when they were playing in Germany. It was only until later that we found out that this was the Beatles and they had done this song.
This one is for Cynthia Weil. I got to interview Tom Snow a while ago, and he talked about the song Somewhere Down the Road.
Yeah.
What did you think of Barry Manilow's interpretation of that song?
I really liked it, and it's Barry's favorite song that he didn't write. To me, no one ever sang it with the passion that Tom Snow sang it on the demo. The danger, it's a danger for songwriters getting hooked on demo performances, and everybody after that has to live up to it. I happen to love the way Tom sings, but Barry did a great job, and we waited a long time for that record. So what did Tom say about it?
Well, it was kind of surprising. I appreciate his honesty, but he said that he didn't think it was as good as what he had written. I mean, he wasn't that fond of the interpretation.
Yeah, but his interpretation was really great.
His was amazing.
It was very touching the way he sang it.
There's something about songwriters singing their own material that in a certain way sets a bar that can never be lived up to. Sometimes stylistically it can be topped, but when it comes to pure emotion, I think songwriters are great singers, even when they can't sing. And Tom can sing, by the way. He's got a wonderful tenor.
I got the opportunity recently to interview Mike Stoller, and I wanted to ask about the inspiration behind On Broadway.
Well, On Broadway, Cynthia and I wrote On Broadway by ourselves and had a different perspective. We wrote it was written for a girls group. They said I hear the neon lights are bright on Broadway. I hear that dreams come true there every day. And they say that dreams come true there every day. They say that something that can let you down. Anyway, it was for a girls group, and it kind of had the same melody. The melody was a little bit more Gershwin-esque. It was, I had the neon lights are bright on Broadway. It had the flavor of the record that we ended up writing with Lieber and Stoll. But anyway, we finished a song that was recorded by a few artists, by the Crystals. It was never released, and the Cookies that Carole King and Jerry Goffin produced. But then we heard the Drifters were up. Cynthia and I thought, well, why don't we play it for Jerry and Mike? Because it could have the feeling of the Drifters. So we went up there and we played it for them. And they did like it. But they said, of course, it needs a change of lyric because this is a guy group. And they said, look, you could either go home and rewrite it yourself or you could write it with us. And we jumped at the chance to write with Lieber and Stoller. I mean, if there were any writers who were our idols, it would be Jerry and Mike. And we wrote it with them, and it was a very exciting writing session. They wrote differently than we did. I mean, Jerry would throw out lines. We'd work on the first verse, and if there was a line missing, instead of finishing the verse, he'd say, well, let's go on to the second verse and see what happens with that. It was an incredible writing session, and I mean, Cynthia said that she learned a lot from that, especially lyrically. Yeah,
absolutely. Jerry was a genius.
Yeah.
He was really one of a kind.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't write with him more.
Mm-hmm.
And we wrote also Only in America with them too. Yeah, we could have written other songs.
Another one of those just timeless songs is Don't Know Much.
Mm-hmm.
Linda Ronstadt and Aaron Neville.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration behind that one?
You want to tell us something?
Sure. Well, my husband decided that he wanted to write a song alone with Tom Snow.
I was thinking the other perspective on it.
Oh.
That who you wrote it for? You wrote it about me.
Well, but first of all, so anyway, they got together and they were having trouble with the lyrics. So they came to me, and when I heard the song, it made me think about Barry, and I wrote the lyric about him. So the man blessed with inspiration, searching for salvation, is Mr. Mann.
Yeah.
Or Barry.
Or Barry. Right. I do call him Barry.
No,
but sometimes he makes me call him Mr. Mann. I always feel like I'm a little kid talking when I say Mr. Mann.
What makes a good song a good song?
A lot of things. I like an intelligent, sophisticated lyric. Even a rock song, if there's an intelligence behind it, I really like that. I think a song that has a melody that is memorable. I would say a great hook. But there are songs out now that don't have great hooks, but they're hits anyway.
Relatability. I think it has to have something that everybody thinks, oh, I thought that, and they expressed it the way I would have liked to, but haven't.
Who do you think are the best living songwriters out there?
Oh, God. I think Jimmy Webb is really a genius. He's a great, great songwriter. And Paul Simon is fantastic. I mean, he's just a great songwriter. I think Mark Cohn is a terrific songwriter too. He's not as well known. He's wonderful. One of my favorite songs in the world is "Walking in Memphis," and Mark knows it too. I mean, there's one line in that song. It's one of the great lines of all time. He says, "Son, are you a Christian?" He says, "Ma'am, I am tonight." It's great.
Yeah.
Just great.
I would agree with Barry, and then of course there are the Stephen Sondheims and people in the theater who are fabulous. I mean, Sondheim is untouchable as a lyricist. As far as pop writers, I definitely would second all of Barry's choices.
I think that Billy Joel is a great writer. He's a very intelligent writer. He's not as moving when it comes to ballads, even though there are some that you can point out, well, it kind of is the opposite of what I'm saying. But generally he's not, but he's a great, great songwriter.
How important do you think it is to kind of evolve with the times when you are a songwriter?
Oh, it was very important for us. I mean, because we just spanned so many decades. I think it's important. I mean,
if you want to keep writing,
right,
if you want to stay in the business, it's important.
Yeah.
Writing changes all the time.
Along with keeping up with the times, How important do you think it is for a songwriter to stay true to himself or herself?
That's really a great question. I think that even though we kept up with the times and music changed to some degree with each decade, whatever we wrote, it still had, even though we were writing for those times, it still had a lot of who we were anyway. There's something, maybe the chord progressions, or maybe the syncopation of the song. Was always something of us in the song.
I agree. I think that expressed it perfectly.
When someone listens to a Weil and Mann song,
oh my God, I got top billing. That's a first.
Or Mann and Weil, whatever. What is it you want the listener of the song to get from the experience of listening?
That's it. You want to take that?
I would say the feeling that this is something that touches me, this is something that's true, and this is something that I can relate to my own life.
I wanted to ask you about this book that you have, Rockin' Babies.
Oh, goody.
Tell us about that.
Our daughter gave birth to twins, and it was a very difficult time because they both had severe colic in which babies can't keep their food down and they keep spitting it up. And so I would go over every night to help her feed them. And we would sit there for hours trying to get formula into these babies. Sometimes it was, 3 hours to try to get a couple of ounces and have them keep it down. So we would talk and ramble. And one night I said to her, I don't know what we talked about before we had these babies. They've taken over our lives. Everything about them is fascinating. They're like the rock stars of our life. And my daughter said, yeah, they're our rockin' babies. And then we started fantasizing about that. Look, we're like the paparazzi when we take their pictures. They spit on authority. And we started writing them down. And comparing babies to rock stars suddenly seemed very viable. And we wrote a whole bunch of things down, and then we submitted it to a publisher, and they liked it. So Rockin' Babies became a children's board book. You can get it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and it's kind of reaction against fluffy bunny sweet books. It's a little more edgy and of the times, and it's been doing very well. We're very happy.
This one's for both of you. What is the best thing about being Barry Mann? What is the best thing about being Cynthia Weil?
Well, I think the best thing about being Cynthia Weil is being married to Barry Mann.
Oh, my God. Thank you, my sweetheart.
And being the mother of and grandmother that I am, and having lived the life that we've lived together.
Yeah, I would say the same. Being a father to my daughter, who I love, and also the grandfather of her children is great. I also think the best part of me being me was just being fortunate that I was born with a talent that I didn't realize. I knew I had talent, but I didn't realize to what extent. And that's a fortunate thing because I was able to do something that I love doing. And not many people are born with that kind of a talent.
Or the ability to use it the way you do.
Yeah, to use it. So that would be my priority.
My final question for anyone who listens to this broadcast, wherever or whenever, it's totally open-ended. What would you like to say to all the listeners?
I would like to thank them for listening and thank them for giving us the careers that we've had and the lives that we've had, and tell them to keep supporting music.
Yeah, I would just second that. I think that's absolutely the way I feel, too.
Well, Cynthia, Barry, thank you very much for this interview.
Our pleasure.
It really is our pleasure.
It was an honor.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, you guys have a good one.
You too.
You too.